Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. My name is Tony Ponturo. I'm here with Ray Warren, my good friend. We're continuing these great podcasts. At least we think they're great. Hopefully you do as well. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a returning audience, if you will, glad to have you. And we're trying to continue to give you great input, give you great thoughts about things that are going on out there. And we've had really great guests, and we're privileged to have another one today. So a lot going on in the world. We just got through some elections. But what's really challenging probably, and that's sort of part of it in a way, how culture is changing, how in the workplace culture with social media, we came through the pandemic. We've got, some people working at home, some people working in the office. It's still a transition going on, still a negotiation going on with company CEOs and their employees. And so we sort of been thinking about, what's that challenge like? What is it to build a culture today that everyone feels are all, sort of rowing in the same direction, they can get to the same place at the same time. So, Ray, welcome. What do you think of all this?
Yeah, it's, sometimes you want to say the more things change, the more they stay the same, but I don't think this is one of those moments because, you and I worked through a pretty traditional, back in the day workplace, commuting to work, cup of coffee, briefcase, suit, tie, climb the corporate ladder. We've had guests who talk about a generation that's they're more interested in climbing their life ladder to get to more of a happy life than to the career ladder to get a higher job that takes more time, puts more pressure, pays more money. But I find it just a fascinating time. It is, everything's up for grabs, and it's more of an independent, we all moved as like one, like everybody was doing the same thing. And now I think it's pretty interesting that people can do different things, different ways, in different locations. And to your point, it goes like from the A to Z, right? And still wind up in the same place. You and I have talked about, you like going from A to Z, and I like going B, C, D, E. And there's room for everybody in that world. It's cool. I think it's just, change is not always bad. It's just change.
No, and it's, and we've talked about, when we were 25 and we thought we were the smartest people in the room, and our generation, the baby boomers, was going to show the world. And now Gen Zs and millennials and, are showing us what they think the world's going to be. And you have to listen. I think that's sort of the key. I think, we both had staff and big operations, and probably the most important thing is how do you listen, and I think it's not only in the executive suite, but probably at a McDonald's, at a Walmart, at a sports team, everyone's sort of looking, am I at least being heard,
Yep.
And I think the fine line here is, you may not always get your idea may not be the idea that goes through, and I think people sometimes get frustrated, which is it's sort of my way or the highway. And if I don't get my way, I'm gone. Versus, okay, at least I know they're listening and it's going to be a balance and a mix. And I see consistency. I think I know you as a person. I think your employees, your fellow workers, I guess, better way to put it, sort of knew you were going to at least be consistent, with how you managed your operation.
Yeah, you want to make it a safe place. That's what people want, right? They want food and safety and love. And so, I think we tried to get that across. I think when you talked about listening, I thought the step before that is having people tell you the truth. Because it's one thing for somebody to say something and be heard, but you want them to be able to tell you what they actually think in a way that, isn't offensive, but isn't going to get them slapped down or thrown out of the office or, no, we don't do that here. I don't want to hear it. And I think one of the big frustrations of folks who don't progress the way they'd like to, you got to be, and you talk about this a lot, and I concur, is authenticity.
Yeah.
You just have to be real. I mean, there's just too many checks and balances in the system, too much information out there. There's no hidden anything. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting time.
Sort of an interesting story. Names will be hidden to protect the guilty. But a group had asked me, I was doing some executive coaching after my corporate time, and this group asked me to bring the group together because their boss said he had an open door policy. The door may have been open, but once you got in there, it wasn't an open door policy. So we get about 10 people together. We're in a conference room at an offsite hotel. And he starts the meeting with, I just want you to know I'm the boss and whatever I ultimately say goes. And I went, time out. Okay, this is the problem. You just established the problem why we're all here. That's not the way to start the meeting. But you get people like that, and then probably if you're on the other side of that conversation, how do you get your voice across to a leader who has that kind of attitude? Yeah.
Well, or worst case scenario for the company, or do you just be quiet and not speak or be politically correct? Make sure that you think you're saying something he wants or she wants to hear. And that's a disaster at the end of the day. That is, and you had a lot of time in one company. I spent, chunks of like 8 or 16 years in 4 companies. It was kind of interesting, the 8 thing that came out when I look back at my career path. And seen a lot of people do it the right way and the wrong way. And people know when you're authentic, and they know when you're serious about saying there is no stupid question. Yes, politely disagree, just don't be rude. Otherwise other people get, excited about the rudeness or whatever. I don't want it to become what do you used to call them? Like a cry session. It was just like everybody just starts, oh yeah, and this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. So you want to try to just stay focused. Managing people is tough, and this culture cannot make it any easier. And it wasn't easy when it was much more kind of, as I said earlier, coordinated and whole, everybody going in the same direction at the same time. And now you've got a lot of people with lots more job opportunities. People, and I'll talk a little bit about, pivoting to a different career. So holding on to good people. Those people are worth a lot in this day and age.
Yeah, what people I think don't understand sometimes is, playing golf yesterday, and I asked the gentleman, how your kids doing? And they're both working. They're in the Denver area, and he said, well, the other one likes their job, and the one doesn't feel they're getting paid enough, and her boss recognizes she's not, but they don't do anything about it. And then what's sad about it is, in many cases, it's not a big amount of money. It's just recognizing. It could be $5,000, $10,000. That is a lot of money in some cases. But people don't do it. And then that person leaves. And then by the time you replace them, train the new person, develop the new person, you've spent $50,000, so
absolutely.
It's just, you just want to shake companies sometime. And we're not, we didn't never admit we're perfect. But you just sometimes sort of scratch your head.
Yeah. No. One of the things I think I was most proud of looking back on the career was how few people quit a place I was running or managing level to go do the same type of job somewhere else. Because that always hurt. If somebody was getting, hey, listen, I'm a producer, but they're offering me senior producer and $50,000 more. Hey, good luck to you and God bless. But if you're like, I'm going to go be a producer over there for like $5,000 more, you're like, well, then there's something that's wrong internally here. Because people don't leave typically for lateral positions unless there's something wrong inside where they work. So I always wanted people to aspire. You want to leave, be my guest, but aspire. Leave up, don't leave sideways.
Yeah, and one last thing, and I know we try not to be sports centric, but one of the things we see a lot of, it's the NFL season. The other sports are starting as well with the NBA and NHL, but you're starting to see some people getting fired and changing and frustration, the head coach. But what you sometimes don't realize, and we all look at this, and the same in the business standpoint, is the leader is not any better or is only as good as the second and third tier of people underneath them, right? And so sometimes you go, well, the head coach hasn't changed, but the offensive coordinator left to go to another team, or the defensive coordinator went to another team. So all of a sudden, they've lost their number two or their number three that may have been a big proponent of making the whole thing work, but that piece
Right.
is missing and it
Yeah.
hasn't been replaced in the same
Right.
way.
Right.
So same way in business. I mean, you're only as good as the people underneath you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've got a
we
great
rock that.
guest.
We rock that world.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited about our next guest, Wayne McDonnell. We'll let him talk a little bit about his background, but Wayne has done a lot of things. I met him at NYU. He was 15 years at NYU and teaching in their sports management program and doing a lot more than teaching, really pretty much being a number two and in some cases running the whole department over that 15-year period of time. He's now at UNC, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And he also is a contributing author to a lot of articles for Forbes on sports. And so he's got a real pulse on that. But maybe as or more importantly, is a pulse on the young person coming through the university system. And so we're going to roll up our sleeves and see someone who's been sort of in the education world for well over 20 years and is also a fanatical baseball fan, as I know. And so with that, let's bring on our guest host, Wayne McDonnell. Welcome, Wayne McDonnell. How are you, Wayne?
Tony, Ray, it is an honor and a privilege to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. Cannot wait to speak to the both of you.
Well, thanks. And, since I probably butchered a little bit your introduction there, uh, give us and give our audience a little idea of your background in a more professional manner than I just did.
Well, sure. I actually started off at Madison Square Garden. I was a financial analyst and an accountant. As Tony had mentioned previously, I am a baseball fanatic. I played, I coached, I ran my own semi-pro team for about 5 years. And I always liked the concept of blending academia with the sports industry. That was like my real passion. It was very odd because it's not really there. So I was presented with an opportunity to adjunct at New York University while I was at Madison Square Garden. One night turned into 2 nights a week, and then 2 years later, I joined the faculty there, and I spent 17 years total. Worked my way up from an adjunct instructor all the way to the first clinical professor of sports at NYU and the first academic chair of a standalone sport management program. My esteemed colleague Bob Boland was the first academic chair of hospitality, tourism, and sports. I was the first one of just the sports program.
Wow.
And that's where I had the great honor and privilege of working with Mr. Ponturo. And I was thinking about it the other day. He had such a profound impact on me in so many ways, where he would come into the office and he had a front row seat to a lot of what I was going through. And just to talk about common sense, basic business knowledge, how to work with people, compassion, discipline. But it resonated to the point where, Tony's a household name at Chapel Hill, not only because he came and visited with me, but it's just those business principles that both you and Ray were talking about a few moments ago. Authenticity, people striving for comfort and respect. And, I've carried that with me to my latest adventure here at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I have a couple of unique roles. Yes, I have a faculty role and all of that, but I am an on-air talent for the ACC Network, where I'm a color analyst for the baseball program.
Now
And
Ray's really jealous about that.
and and now what's even more unique is in the day and age of NIL, I'm having these fascinating conversations with world-class student athletes, not only about, what we do in the classroom, but business and what the world looks like and kind of tying in my passion. So I have the best of all worlds right now in terms of trying to blend, my baseball expertise and then trying really to have a positive impact and influence on the next generation of leaders in the sports industry.
That's great. Ray?
That's a dream. Yeah, that sounds really, really exciting. All right, so I do have a question, but I also have a comment slash statement. I mean, I will tell you, and I don't know if you saw it or if Tony mentioned, but I worked at Raycom Sports for 15 years, the last 6 as CEO, so spent a lot of time at Chapel Hill. Spent a lot of time on ACC Sports, and really those were like the first regional sports networks. So it was just a glorious time, and there's to me nothing like the ACC. It gave me coming from New York City, it gave me a college basketball team to root for. But so it goes to root for. All right, so I don't have a clue. I mean, it sounds like you might be from New York.
A little bit.
Okay. And I then wonder, I know you're a huge baseball fan. Who's your favorite team?
I grew up in the Bronx, so it's a birthright to be a Yankees fan. And I get made fun of a lot at UNC for it because there's only my other colleague, Dr. Brian Petrosimone. We're the only 2 Yankee fans, and it's like kindred spirits. So
Yeah.
the World Series was rough for us.
Well, so I know who Tony is. I was born in the Bronx as well. So it's interesting to be a Yankee and a Yankee fan at North Carolina. I wonder if the kids don't say, "Oh, great! I have a Yankee fan and a Yankee as my instructor. This is awesome."
I will say that first year there, and you were talking about pivoting and all of that. It was a major change in my life because
Sure.
I grew up in the Bronx. I married a
Yeah.
Queens girl, lived in Queens, worked in Manhattan my entire life.
Yeah.
And I went down there, and the first response was, "You don't sound like you're from around here.
Yeah.
We don't do this around here." And then my thought was, "No, you're going to start doing this right now."
Uh-huh.
But it was really the whole idea. I kind of view my career as a journey, and there's been ups, there's been downs. I I want to work until the day I call it a life. I feel like I haven't done anything yet, and I just want to keep going and going and going. And I love how you and Ray, you and Tony talk about authenticity, because that's a hallmark that I try to bring into the classroom. And I try to tell people what you see is what you get, but I will do everything I can to possibly help you. But you're going to have to meet me halfway. And we're on this journey together. So I love that whole concept of authenticity because I think we live in a world right now where that is lacking. And it desperately is needed because we really need to know where people stand and agree to disagree, which is great. Because I'm also a firm believer that conflict is not a negative word. If you have respect for each other, out of conflict can come compromise, collegiality, and some creativity.
Yep. It's funny, and Tony, I don't want to hijack this podcast, but the through line when you think about culture is authenticity, because that would cut through the digital world, the social world. I mean, they talk about all these kids putting on Instagram pictures. Everything's an Instagram picture. It's totally fake. It's all staged. Other people feel bad. Well, that's not my life. Well, that's not their life either, but that's the picture you took in that moment. So I think I think if you just stay authentic to yourself and the people around you, you will be a very successful and happy person in life. Not work too, but I love that. I like the way you've kind of uncovered or brought up the whole authenticity. By Tony and I talked about it, but then you jumped on it, and I think that's an actual really important part of all this discussion we'll have today, Tony.
part 2 of this podcast will be available next week. For more information, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com. Thank you.